Down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone. I am coming to you live from the grave. This is the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid-lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings broadcast, and I am your ghostly host with the most, Rick. Tonight, I hope to be able to beguile you with stories from the grave. And unfortunately, my internet connection appears to be going all over the map. I'm sorry. This is not good. The spirit world is hard to come from. Well, we'll just have to play it by ear, I suppose. But before I get going on that, let me come into a more, shall we say, visual form. All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. This is the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid-lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings broadcast, and hey, I'm just gonna let you know I am seeing problems here, for some strange reason. So I'm gonna try and correct that real quick here. This kind of stinks when you have issues. Let me see if I can correct this on the fly. Hopefully, this will help with things a little better. Got all kinds of things happening here. I don't understand what's going on. But hopefully everybody can hear me and can see me okay. I'm seeing all kinds of problems over here, so I apologize for that. I'm gonna try and get this worked out. This is what happens when you have a single one-man show. Don't know if it's the video that's diving out or what, but let me try. I'm gonna try dropping, trying to change my output. I'm trying to get it into a position where it'll actually go properly. It might have something to do with all of the stuff that I'm doing special effects wise. So I apologize for that. We'll see if this kind of helps stabilize things a little bit more. Probably. I'm keeping an eye on a couple of things here, but all right. So, I'm going to be honest with you. Nothing really is more scary there. I think I might have gotten it figured out. It might have had something to do with the way that I'm doing this special effect of just my head. Anyway, okay, so it seems to be bouncing a little bit, so we're gonna have to try and hopefully keep this going. Gone about as low as I can dare right now, which kind of sucks because I thought this would be really, really good. But anyway, okay, so audio is okay. I'm hearing from my good friend and fellow Catriot, Buddy Weiser, over on the Rumble channel. And I don't know if there's anybody on the YouTube stream or even in the Facebook stuff. I'm not seeing any information coming in from anybody over there. So we're going to push on, press on, keep going. So tonight I wanted to take a break. I wanted to take a momentary lapse of my usual programming. And tonight I want to talk about some scary stuff. I want to give you a couple of things. I want to read a couple stories for you. Last year I did a special and I did a rendition of Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. Edgar Allan Poe, for those that don't know, he's a story writer and a poet. Most of his stuff is very, very dark, and honestly, it's amazing to me. And you know, I just realized I didn't start the audio side of the program. Boy, I am just all discombobulated tonight. Okay, so audio listeners, now that you've just joined, I'm sorry, I apologize. But anyway, as I was getting into stuff, this is what happens with live broadcasts. We have all kinds of issues, things that pop up. So, yes, buddy, let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon, really. Let's go, Brandon. I mean, honestly, nothing can be more scarier than our current administration, but I'm going to try and get to that point tonight. Little off kilter here. See the floating glass. But before I do that, I think we have, there might be, let me see. Do we have a telephone call? Oh, yes, we do. We have a telephone call. What is the call?
It is the witching hour. No one is alive to take your call. And after the electric shock, you may leave a message.
All right. So, it is the witching hour. It is the witching hour. It's the time where we start talking about spooky and scary stuff here. I know that the current admin is probably the most scariest thing that we're dealing with today, but to be honest with you, there are other things that are afloat. Let me tell you a story. This comes from the book. As soon as I can get to the right place. From the book called True Ghost Stories. True stories of the terrifyingly paranormal activity, haunted houses, and spooky places from around the world. This is penned by, as soon as I can find it, Jo Levine. She copyrighted this in 2015. And yes, I must get my ghostly glasses so that I can read. Here we go. All right, so we have, I'll turn the music down just a tad here so that we can actually hear me. Here we go. All right. The most harmful poltergeist cases. So poltergeists are ghosts that are capable of hurting you. I didn't know that. They can move things and throw objects if they want. Unfortunately, poltergeists are hateful entities. So, more often than not, they would always want to hurt anyone who comes in their way. Their name, which is of German origin, translates into noisy ghosts. Very fitting, don't you think? In this section, you will learn about the most terrifying poltergeist cases ever recorded. So this is the first most terrifying poltergeist case within the True Stories of the True Ghost Stories book. The Angry Mackenzie Ghosts in Greyfriars Cemetery. Before anything else, let's get a clear picture of who George Mackenzie was. Mackenzie was a lawyer back in the 1600s. During his time, King Charles II wanted a group of Presbyterians called Covenanters to change their religions. When the group refused to follow the king's demands, Mackenzie signed their persecution papers. Some of them were executed, but many were also imprisoned. The prison, now called Covenanters Prison, had very inhumane methods back then. Gee, not much of a surprise, is it? Most of the prisoners would be left with little food and be subjected to the cold winters without any form of heat. And if they were not killed, they were sold to become slaves. The funny thing is, when Bloody Mackenzie died, he was buried in Greyfriars Cemetery, which is very close to the Covenanters prison. His final resting place is now famous in the name of Black Mausoleum and is the home to a lot of poltergeist activities. It all started in 1999 with a man so homeless that he desperately sought the comforts of cemetery warmth. How wrong could he be? How wrong could he be? Because he encountered not protection, but a hateful spirit. Reportedly, he climbed into a coffin in the tomb of George Mackenzie, the lawyer who had signed the deaths of over 18,000 enemies of former King Charles II. But instead of being steady as a rock, the coffin shook on its own, covering the man with dust from the dead. According to reports, a guard saw the whole commotion, and both him and the homeless man were terrified. This incident happened in 1998, and since then, Bloody Mackenzie became famous for causing bruises and scratch marks among tourists and grave visitors. A dog walker saw the event, and although he was terrified, he just thought that the man simply saw a ghost. Well, not exactly, because the real disturbances from angry ghosts are yet to come. From then on, people claimed that strange activities kept on happening. In fact, it was so bad that the city council had to close the cemetery to the public. It was only when Jan Andrew Henderson, a historian and a book writer, established a ghost tour that people came to see the cemetery again. Even Henderson admitted that the case of the Mackenzie poltergeist is uncommon. A poltergeist attack typically happens for a few weeks straight, and then it will subside. It also usually targets just one person or one family. Mackenzie's case went on and on since 1998, although there were times where no activities were recorded, and it had targeted a lot of people, particularly participants of the cemetery tours. That also did not turn out well. 350 of the people who participated in the tour claimed that they had been attacked by unknown forces. 170 of them passed out, and a lot also got injuries, including fractured bones. Should you be around the area of Edinburgh, this is in England, would you dare visit the cemetery? Or perhaps you may join the tour. While there, remember that other spirits may be lingering in Covenanters prison. After all, is the home to tortured spirits. Now, interesting thing about a lot of these stories that we have, they all deal with places that have, massive amounts of death and pain and destruction for these things to come out. It tends to be scary. All right, so what do we do on Halloween? A lot of us will go and we'll actually watch. We will actually watch scary movies and horror movies. So in this same book, there obviously are horror movies that were based on real life events. For an example, I don't know if anybody has seen the Amityville Horror. The author here has it listed in 2005. I do know that there are other ones later. But the Amityville Horror movie is perhaps one of the films that set the stage to bring out more true-to-life horror movies. Set in 1975, the movie focuses on one family who transferred to a home in Amityville, New York. Before they bought the house, their broker told them of its history approximately a year ago. So before 1975, so that would have been 1973, 74. Ronald DeFeo murdered 6 of his family members in the house. The broker asked them if they would change their mind about buying the house, but the couple, thinking that there was nothing wrong about it, went ahead and pursued the purchase. They were advised by a friend to bless the house, especially with its murderous history. The priest arrived, and when he arrived in a room on the second floor, he heard a male voice telling him to get out. He did not mention it to Kathy and George at the time, but he did warn them to stay away from that room. The priest reported to develop a fever and blisters just after leaving the house. Just like anything, they started out well until the youngest child mentioned she had a friend named Jody. Apparently, Jody was a child of Ronald DeFeo, a child whom he murdered and locked in a closet. Not only that, but Kathy started to have vivid nightmares of the murders. She started learning who in the family died first and in what room, even though she did zero research on the murders. George, the head of the family, started to become abusive to the children. He would also always strangely woke up at 3:15 a.m., the approximate time of the DeFeo murders. When his wife Kathy, who was convinced that it was the doing of the house's horror, tried to evacuate the family out of the house, George attacked her. Fortunately, she was able to knock him out. Thus, the spirit who possessed him was driven away. The ending was realistic, though. The family left the house without even returning for their personal things. Now, I knew that the Amityville Horror was partly based on a true story, but I didn't realize that it was actually based off of really a true story. Of course, we have The Exorcist in 1973. That's based on a true story as well. The film is about a child, Regan, who killed her baby sister and another man, a man whom her mother had a crush on because she was being possessed. It all started with Regan playing with a Ouija board. What was that? Did you hear that? Buddy says, "Oh, my goodness. I don't know. What was it? Could it have possibly been?" Something scary this way comes. Anyway, as I was saying about The Exorcist in 1973, so it all started when Regan began playing with a Ouija board. And after that, she started to act strangely, using bad language, becoming uncommonly strong, and making scary, mysterious noises. Now, I am going to have to admit, I have had my own interaction with a Ouija board when I was younger. We did have the Ouija board where it felt like the little thing, whatever you call that pointer deal, that the Ouija board, it felt like that thing was being pushed around on its own when we were using it. But, again, the mind can play tricks on people. So therefore, it is very odd, very strange that something like that would happen. Of course, I'm a little older now, so I kind of, laugh a little bit about that. But back to The Exorcist. When it was confirmed that Regan was indeed being possessed by a demon, 2 priests were called to do the exorcism. One of them apparently was already able to defeat the same demon before. While the exorcism was happening, one of the priests was sent out because he was having trouble concentrating due to the demon's mocking. When he returned, the other priest had already died. He begged the demon to possess him instead of the child, and when his request was granted, he jumped out of the window as a form of self-sacrifice, ultimately completing the exorcism. According to the author, the facts are based on a 1979 exorcism done in Cottage, Maryland. The real story was about a boy who started acting strangely and was soon sent to be exorcised. Exorcisms. A part of the Catholic religion that is still, to this day, I believe sometimes called for. Meaning that people try and do them. Now, let's move on to some of the spookiest places around the world. So these are scary places. If you're fascinated by scary movies, scary places, I would recommend that you find books like this and go around and try and find these places. Go to these places, in order to interact with the paranormal. But the first one, number one on the list for the author here shows as spookiest places around the world, Lizzie Borden bread and breakfast. Yeah, that's hard. Lizzie Borden Bread and Breakfast Museum. This is in the United States. Would you dare stay the night in the crime scene to an unsolved homicide? If you're brave enough, you can surely be the guest to the Lizzie Borden Bread and Breakfast Museum in Fall River, Massachusetts. In the home, which is now a museum, you can book a night of terror, well, depending upon your bravery. Allegedly, in 1892, Lizzie Borden killed both her father and her stepmother using a hatchet. Here is the full story. Mr. Borden was a wealthy man, but despite that, he kept insisting that they had to live frugally. Then, being him, his two daughters, Emma and Lizzie, and his second wife, Abby. According to reports, the family would often eat spoiled food because Mr. Borden did not want to waste any. Abby did not have a good relationship with her husband. Abby did not have a good relationship with her husband and her two daughters, who also disliked her. To make matters worse, a man named William visited them to tell Mr. Borden that he was, in fact, his son. Mr. Borden, of course, rejected it. He even changed his will and said that his wealth would go either to Abby and her family, or all of it was to be donated to charity. That meant no inheritance for Emma, Lizzie, and the supposedly illegitimate son, William. On the morning of August 14th, Lizzie, Abby, and their maid Maggie were in the house. Abby went up to arrange things for a guest when the killer opened her window and killed her with a hatchet. In total, Abby received 19 blows. When Mr. Borden returned, he sat on the couch and the murderer struck him with the same hatchet. This time, the murderer gave him 11 blows. Due to the number of blows, police concluded it was a crime of passion. Someone who obviously hated the couple, and he or she made it known by killing them with such violence. At first, they suspected Lizzie, and she was even arrested for it. But since there was a significant lack of evidence, she was also released. In the museum, you can find photos of the crime scene, and guests often find it terrifying. But who wouldn't? After all, you will be thrown back in time when two people killed, and up till now, the mystery behind it is still unsolved. Wow. Here's one from... let's go... This one's from the Island of the Dolls in Mexico. So again, we're talking about places around the world that are haunted. It should fascinate anyone to visit a place full of dolls. Just imagine how much it will please you to see an island where trees and fences are adorned by these toys. Things that make it spooky is the condition of the dolls. Almost all of them are mutilated. The story started with Don Julian Santana, who, together with his small family, lived on an island in the 1950s. Allegedly, when he came there, the ghost of a little girl talked to him, telling him the story of how she died by drowning and of how lonely she was feeling. To please the girl, Don Julian started collecting dolls, and he displayed them on trees. Others speculate that it was more than just pleasing the girl. It was to keep the island from her evil grasps. When the spirit still seemed to be displeased, Don Julian garnered even more dolls, even to the point of trading his fruits and vegetables for them. He was he also confided to one of his family members that the little girl seemed to want him where she currently was. And apparently the girl got what she wanted, because in 2001, Don Julian drowned in the same area where the girl was found. Now that's spooky. I don't know about you, but that is definitely spooky. Well, you know, back east, at least here in the Americas, back east is, and especially the Northeast, where things like the Salem witch trials occurred and those kinds of things happened. There's a lot of speculation about ghosts and spirits haunting in those areas. This one is one of them. The Belcourt Castle, which is located in Newport, Rhode Island. Aside from its magnificent design, people are also attracted to the lush greens and the tall trees surrounding it. From 1891 to 1894, the castle was built from the ground up using the expert design of Richard Hunt, a man considered as a pioneer in architecture. Although it was originally made to be a summer house, tourists now come and visit the area any time of the year, which is what with its appealing vista and relaxing ambiance. Of course, it also helps that the castle is reported to be a haunted location. I don't know about you, but I don't know if I really want to go someplace where it's haunted or potentially haunted with, for relaxation. That doesn't sound very relaxing to me. Could be, but I don't think so. Anyway, the first owner of the castle was Oliver Belmont, an avid collector of not just armor suits, but of manuscripts written way back in the medieval times. From his work in Congress and his mighty inheritance from his rich family, this man had more money than he knew what to do with, and hence his desire for a luxurious castle. By the time of its construction, Oliver was still a bachelor, but he soon married a woman named Alva Vanderbilt, not Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt, in 1896, and the couple resided in the newly built summer retreat, with Alva making it even more eccentric in style. Unknown to many, their marriage was surrounded with controversy. Alva was apparently the former wife of Oliver's best friend, William Vanderbilt, whom she had 3 children with. It wasn't clear whether William was aware of his wife's and his best friend's affair, but not much information was dedicated for that. After Alva and Oliver, I keep wanting to throw a French thing to this, but anyway, after Alva and Oliver were married, they lived in luxury, oftentimes traveling and collecting rare items. In 1908, however, Oliver Belmont died, leaving Alva the rightful owner of Belcourt. Alva contributed well in society. Aside from giving away hefty contributions to hospitals and other health facilities, she made it her mission to bring gender equality to women by actively joining the women's suffrage movement, which enforced the government to give ladies the freedom to vote. She also pushed for women's rights in government affairs and business ventures. All these she did to relieve the pain she felt when her beloved husband, Oliver, left her alone. At the age of 80, however, she passed on, and the house was given to the eldest Belmont child, Oliver's brother. Now, the castle is owned by the Tinney family, who opened it as a leisure hotel. Throughout the years, guests report that the former summer retreat is haunted came pouring in. For one, Oliver Belmont's collections of armor suits move from one place to another without human intervention. They claimed that the suits have a life of their own. One of the suits can also be heard screaming, according to reports. The previous owner of the suit was shot to death by an arrow which hit him in the eye via the visor slit. And of course, there is a mirror in the castle, which when you look at it, bears no reflection at all. As of now, ghost tours are also available in the Belcourt, but participants are rarely allowed to take photos. Some of the guests who secretly brought their camera and took pictures showed that several photos featured unexplained orbs. Paranormal enthusiasts agree that the owners were not the only ones haunting the place, but the rare collections of Oliver, especially the armor suits, which probably have the stored energy in them. Interesting. And that is Belcourt Castle, the Belcourt Castle in Newport, Rhode Island. You know, I seem to recall hearing about those suits of armor and seeing references to them in movies. I wonder if this is where they're pointing it to. Anyway, now I mentioned Edgar Allan Poe earlier. I mentioned that last year I had read his short story called The Telltale Heart. And he actually is listed in here, or at least his Western burial ground is listed here as one of the places of the haunted. The Old Western Burial Ground is located in Baltimore, Maryland, in the United States. Although a lot of people are unfamiliar with this gravesite, it holds the remains of several famous people, such as Edgar Allan Poe, Francis Scott Key's son, President James Buchanan's grandfather, 15 military heroes from the war in the year of 1812, as well as the Revolutionary War, and 5 mayors of the city of Baltimore. According to experts, the reason why the cemetery is almost forgotten was because of the Westminster Hall, formerly Westminster Presbyterian Church, which was built over a huge part of the graveyard. While it is true that many tombs are still accessible above ground, some of the burial grounds can now only be visited via the catacombs beneath the building. Paranormal enthusiasts agree that it is in those underground catacombs where the spirits manifest. One of the most entertaining ghosts in the Western burial ground is, of course, the ghost of Edgar Allan Poe. According to witnesses, he is often seen every October 7th, the day of his death, and when you spot him, he might converse with you. You might also hear a scream from below the grounds. If you do, then think of the Screaming Skull of Cambridge, Maryland, because it is said to be buried there as well. Authorities have it that the skull, due to its incessant screaming, was bound, gagged, and buried in a cement tomb, but the screams still live on. Another ghost was that of Leona Wellesley, an asylum patient who was buried in her straitjacket. So if you happen to see a lady in a straitjacket following you while she is laughing, then make no mistake, it's her. Another enduring mystery in the burial grounds is about the man who was almost always seen every January 19th. This is Edgar Allan Poe's birthday. The said man wore completely black clothes, including a black fedora hat and a black scarf which covered his face. His identity is unknown, but if the witnesses' accounts would be taken into consideration, he has been seen visiting the late author's gravesite for the past 5 decades. Each time he would leave a bottle of cognac and 3 stems of a rose. At one point, the offerings included an unsigned note, which only said, quote, "Edgar, I haven't forgotten you," unquote. Many people suspected that the man who frequented Edgar Allan Poe's grave was Jeff Jerome, the curator of the late author's house in Baltimore, but he insisted that it wasn't him. To prove his case, he invited over 70 people to celebrate Poe's birthday, midnight on January 19th. They talked about the author, drank wine, and read some of his most remarkable works. An hour into the celebration, the black man was spotted, so the photographer, backed by Life magazine, took a photo using his infrared night vision camera. True enough, the man appeared in the photo featured in one of Life's 1990 issues, and the bottle of cognac and roses were present. That's kind of scary to think about. Some ghost that's just walking around. And very, very odd. Very odd. Okay. So, one thing that we talk about on Halloween, oftentimes, what you hear and see with people and kids' costumes is vampires. Vampires are like a huge thing about Halloween. And in this book, the author is claiming that vampires are real. Now, there's some kind of mix-up, because there are some vampire movies that we see in vampire books that portray vampires in a very negative light, and then there's others that portray them as very sexual beings, let's say. So, from the book here, who can resist the idea of sexy vampires falling in love? Apparently no one. That's why they have dominated the books, movies, and even news. ABC's 2020 created a documentary about people who are known to be real vampires. No, they don't have fangs, but they love blood as much as real vampires do. According to them, they have a very rare psychological condition that makes them feel that food is not enough to keep them doing the activities needed in their lives. How do they solve it? They drink blood. How do they do it? Well, they pick a sterilized scalpel and poke the skin of a willing donor, and when the blood oozes out, they can drink straight from the skin. Donors can actually choose which body part is to be cut. Some vampires admit that at times they transfer the blood into drinking glasses, just like how you would drink a normal juice, or maybe a wine. Balthazar Ashaniston, the one who was interviewed, related that he drinks as often as twice a week. I don't know about you, but I don't think I'm going to let anybody poke me in the neck or any other place to try and get blood from me. Oh my goodness. Okay. So not only are there haunted places, but there's also haunted items. And this one, this one's a little spooky. So this one is called the Chair of Death. Now, the Chair of Death has a notorious history. One must say that all of them, the deaths, mind you, were accidental. But it would be weird not to be frightened. And when you learn of its history, you might just say that it truly has the power to cast death to the person sitting in it. So Thomas Busby, a convicted criminal, was scheduled to be hanged a day in 1702. His last request was to be served his final meal in his favorite pub. As customary to a person who is facing his death, his wish, of course, was granted. After his meal, he uttered to no one in particular, "May sudden death come upon anyone who will sit on my chair." One can think that mere words cannot hold any grudge, but they soon learned it can. Soldiers who sat on the chair never returned from the war they fought. Pilots who sat there crashed their planes. One who was just trying to provoke faith faced an untimely death after he fell in a hole. A construction worker fell from a roof. Even the cleaning lady who just accidentally sat on it apparently died immediately. The owner, now convinced that evil is now lurking on the chair, locked it in the basement. Unfortunately, a delivery man who was placing items dared to rest on the chair, and he too faced an early demise that same day. Frustrated, the owner just donated it to a museum so that no one will dare sit on the chair, even though through an accident. The staff of the museum displayed it by hanging it on the wall. Yeah, let's see, what else do we have here? Well, what would Halloween be if it weren't about ghosts? So let's talk about some famous ghosts. And these are some world famous ghosts. Number one here is President Abraham Lincoln. Now, everybody knows that Lincoln was assassinated, but not all had the knowledge that the late president might have had a premonition regarding his own demise. According to stories, the president confided to his cabinet that he dreamt of going into a funeral while wearing white. When he asked one of the attendees about what was happening, the person replied, "The president has been assassinated." After the assassination, there were a number of reports that claim of Lincoln's ghost in the White House, of course. Among the people who testified about seeing his ghosts were Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands, First Lady Coolidge, and the funniest among the witnesses was Winston Churchill himself. His story mentioned that while getting out of the bathroom after a shower, he saw the president by the window near the fireplace. He greeted the president by saying, "Good evening, Mr. President. You seem to have me at a disadvantage." The president did not respond in words, but he smiled and disappeared into thin air. Wow, to have an interaction with the President of the United States, President Abraham Lincoln. Arguably one of the best presidents that this country has ever had. Now, who else do we have here? Well, we have another famous name, Anne Boleyn. So stories often suggest that ghosts linger in only one place, but not the ghost of Anne Boleyn. Reports often include that her ghost appears in a lot of places in London, in Bickling Hall, Hever Castle, and of course her most famous place of appearance, the London Tower. But before we go on, who was Anne Boleyn? Anne Boleyn was the second wife of King Henry VIII, and she is the mother of Queen Elizabeth I. She only served the title of queen for 3 years before King Henry allegedly grew tired of her. She was accused of a lot of things, from witchcraft to adultery and incest. Most historians, however, believe none of them and suggest that they were merely malicious accusations. On March 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn faced her death. Accounts also relate that during her execution, the executioner eased her by whispering, "Where is my sword?" when in fact he already had it and had not wanted Anne Boleyn to wait any further for her final breath. A lot of people who have seen Anne Boleyn's ghost say that she was as pretty as she was before, a beautiful lady wearing a fantastic gown. Others are not so lucky because they have seen her ghost in the state after her execution, a headless lady who holds her head under her arms. Now, I've heard reports too that Elvis will actually go and walk around Graceland. And it's kind of interesting. We have reports of ghosts, we have goblins, we have ghouls, we have scary creatures of all kinds. That paranormal experiences such as these are very interesting because, you know, the human mind has a hard time understanding things that it can't fathom. And so, you know, being able to try and explain it in a paranormal sense is actually quite a remarkable thing, that we create things in our minds and in our brains. And eyewitness recounts are also a little difficult as well, because, you know, the human being is not exactly the most reliable source when it comes to eyewitness accounts. You know, there have been several experiments who have shown this on multiple occasions. So sometimes in the case of ghosts, I would say seeing is definitely not believing. But hey, let's scoot. Oh my goodness. You know, there's a lot of places like ghost towns. And let me see if I can find one that would be interesting here. Oh, yes. Silent Hill in Pennsylvania. So Silent Hill is a 2006 film about a couple, Rose and Christopher, who experienced some problems with their adopted daughter, Sharon. Because Sharon kept on sleepwalking and whispering the name of the town Silent Hill, Rose decided to bring her to the town in question. Yeah, that's smart. Geez, inexplicably, my child is whispering Silent Hill. Let's go there. Okay, a little off. Once they reached the place, strange events started happening. Sharon disappeared and monsters began attacking. Soon enough, they discovered that Silent Hill was once plagued with witch burning, and that Sharon's other self was a victim of it. Believe it or not, some people think that Silent Hill is real, and that it is Centralia, the ghost town in Columbia County, Pennsylvania. One could describe Centralia as hell on earth. Below the abandoned lands are apparent burning mines, which could get so hot that it would boil groundwater enough to release steam, creating the ghost town's foggy appearance. Drive around and you'll notice few living people. Instead, you will encounter 3 cemeteries. In other words, most of the town residents are the buried dead. Citizens who have abandoned the place couldn't be blamed. After all, why would they subject themselves to a hellish surrounding when they could comfortably move elsewhere? Soon enough, the zip code 17927, which was originally assigned for Centralia, was revoked. The town's appearance often lights up ghostly rumors and paranormal happenings. Some say the dead buried in the 3 cemeteries are restless in the knowledge that the settlement that they had come to love no longer exists. Their restless souls could be the source of the disembodied voices, spiritual apparitions, and creepy feelings. Some of the unexplained events were discussed in Off-Roaders. Now, Off-Roaders in the book here is in italic, which is telling me that it's probably a television show or something along those lines. And it looks like Buddy is picked in. I'm assuming that's Silent Hill, meaning the scary movie that you're referring to, Buddy. First, there was the story of Ruth Ederson, who explored Centralia in 1998 during a fall season. Together with a friend, Ruth saw a couple of people emerge from the hole behind a graveyard. The people were wearing mining helmets, which was unusual, and after a few moments, they vanished along with the steam that came with them from the same subsidence hole. A resident of New Jersey, Scott Saylor, also related a spooky happening, to which his response was to say that, quote, there was something wrong with the place, end quote, and that he, quote, isn't coming back. And Buddy just confirmed this is about Silent Hill. So Scott's tours with his friends started out great. They saw the famous landmarks in Centralia, like the cracked Route 61 and the burning hillside. They witnessed the remains of a ghost town and felt the town it was once. When they reached the eastern part of town, however, strange things began happening. It started with just steam coming from a hill, but as they observed the fossils, Scott and two of his friends heard a voice coming from below the ground. The first sounds were inaudible, and they assumed that it was just some other visitors exploring the place, so they ignored it. However, the sound was heard again, and this time it was clearer. Leave this place. Or something along those lines. At that point, Scott admitted that the hill was becoming steamier, and the smell was awful. Probably from the sulfur. And that since they were already spooked, they headed back to the car. As they left, the voice spoke again and said, "Why? Why did you do that?" Scott was reluctant in telling the story, but still figured that he should share this one. Another eyewitness in 1999, Jim, and his girlfriend Lori went to the same place and experienced scary things as well. Jim's story opened up by saying that they weren't superstitious people. Whenever they could, they would visit abandoned dwellings, old houses, and creepy cemeteries, and they would be okay. However, their trip to Centralia, quote, gave them a fright, end quote. Jim mentioned that in the ghost town there was an abandoned twin home at the side of the street, located at one of the hills. The two units had red numbers displayed on the front, probably an indication that they would be demolished soon. Jim and Lori noticed that the back door was open, so in they went and explored the slightly dark house because the windows were boarded up. Finding nothing of interest on the first floor, they decided to check out the second floor. For a few minutes, everything was okay, but all of a sudden, they heard footsteps coming from the third floor. Initially, the couple thought that someone else was in the house, so they just waited. However, when the sounds became louder, indicating that the person was nearing them, and no one emerged from the stairs connecting the second and the third floor, Jim and Lori decided it was time to go. According to Jim, it was as if someone was using the stairs, but they couldn't see him or her. Frightened, they made a beeline for the back door, headed to their car, and drove away. When they were brave enough to look back, they were half expecting that someone from the window was watching them, but there was no one. So whether or not Centralia is a true Silent Hill, the place has surely left its mark in the lives of several people. Spooky stories. Now, this one I can tell you, this next one, this is kind of a little bit long. I might go a little over on terms on time, but this is a place called the Seattle Underground. Now, this actually does exist. I live outside of Seattle, so I can tell you that this place does exist. It is actually remnants of the old city that had once burned and was since built over. So, going on here, Seattle Underground. Exploring places always brings excitement to people, especially if the destination is filled with memories. Such places are museums that contain various items of importance, and old preserved streets where you can see the time-worn establishments and houses. For some people, however, the joy of exploration can be achieved by entering one abandoned place and savoring the feeling that once there were people there. They laughed, they cried, and told stories there, but now the place is derelict. Of course, if you are a paranormal enthusiast, seeing a ghost would be an added bonus. So such was the goal of a woman by the name of Susan Tredder, Tredder, when she decided to join the Seattle Underground Tours, which had the title Underground Paranormal Experience. Now, Susan was accompanied by two friends, whom she promised the tour wouldn't be scary. After handing over their jackets because the tunnel was too hot for added garments, they were provided with a vest containing ghost-detecting, quote-unquote, equipment, which included an EVP recorder in case there were disembodied voices, and an EMF, or electromagnetic frequency device, to detect energy presence which could come from ghosts. Before proceeding with the tour, they were asked to watch an episode of Ghost Hunters, a show on the Travel Channel. The episode was about the team's encounter when they investigated the Seattle Underground. And since it included experiences such as hearing weird knocks and bumps, the participants of the tour visibly became pumped up. Headed by the tour guide, the participants entered the tunnel one by one. They passed by a locker door, and the guy told a story of a murdered man who died violently right in that area. He called to the man, asking for him to make his presence known, but to no avail. The man did not grant the guide's request. There was nothing paranormal that Susan and her friends could detect, but she said the tour in itself was worth it. Does that mean the ghost town in Seattle Underground isn't really haunted? Not really. In fact, participants from other tours claimed sorry about that. So participants from other tours claimed that a lot of paranormal things happened in the tunnels. Experience included, but were not limited to, sudden feeling of pain and woe, which couldn't be explained. Most of the time, only women participants experience it, and it only happens when they reach an area in the tunnel called prostitution area. Then, in an old bank vault, some men felt cold breeze. Remember, it was supposed to be hot inside the tunnels. And a few of them saw an apparition of a miner. Blog posts about their experience in the underground were also interesting. One claimed that right after the tour, her camera batteries died down. She admitted that she took some photos and videos, but claimed that it was still weird because during a vacation, the camera took 1 week before it needed charging. On top of that, one of the photos that she captured was blurred, and it wasn't weird per se. She insisted that it was the only photo with poor quality. Desiring to at least make it better, she used basic editing, but the quality became even worse. In the end, she decided that it didn't mean anything, even when the area where the photo was taken was said to be haunted by a white lady. If the witnesses' accounts would be taken into consideration, it was clear that the tunnel was haunted, but the question is, how did it become haunted? While places like Centralia are areas above ground, how come the Seattle Underground was a town beneath the lands? So here's why. Seattle in the 1800s was made largely of woods. Houses, shops, establishments, everything was made of fragile lumber. So when a fire started in 1889, known as the Great Seattle Fire, it became impossible to put out. Firefighters used too much water, which damaged the city's water pressure. But even with that effort, the fire was able to destroy 26 city blocks. It was then that the city of Seattle decided to rebuild the place, but only if two changes would take place. First, everything should be made with stone or brick, and second, the new city would be established 1 to 2 stories higher than before. The first change was because of their trauma with the fire, and the second was due to the frequent occurrence of flood. When the new city was built, many people immediately moved there, except for some mostly merchants, who opted to stay in the undamaged portion of the now underground Seattle. In 1907, however, the city of Seattle condemned the tunnels due to the fear of epidemic. And so the once lively city was literally buried beneath the land and figuratively within the people's minds. Ghost towns are sad towns. Imagine the fact that people once lived there. They walked, shared stories, gossiped, and worked in the area, and now the place they once knew, is no more. Perhaps the reason why ghost towns are haunted is because the memories, which experts agree, leave an imprint that can manifest in the world of the living. Ghost towns, paranormal experiences, Halloween, before All Saints Day. Anyway, so that pretty much wraps up my Halloween special for this year. Do me a favor, if you like the content, if you like what I bring to you, the normal content, of course, subscribe. Please. I picked up a few subscribers this week on YouTube. I am very happy about that. One thing to keep in mind is that you subscribers are the ones that keep this channel moving, keep this channel going, keep me doing what I do. If you would also do me a favor and check out my store. I have a store with several t-shirts, sweatshirts, things of that nature. Store.whiskeymusings.online. Store.whiskeymusings.online. We'll see you next time on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Good night, everyone.